How's it going? In this chapter of the green machine and the work being done, we're going to be, from start to finish, removing the engine. Now, this is the naturally aspirated motor in the car that you'll see being removed and everything around it. So I'll be removing, to get the engine out, the K-frame, the brake, and along with the K-frame will be the brakes, the steering, suspension. A lot of that is going to be for easier access, easier service, and because I'm comparing both the turbo PT and the naturally aspirated PT for any differences, if there's any damaged parts or parts that need to be serviced or replaced, the idea is to do that all at the same time. So that's why part of the reason why I'm taking off so much steering, suspension, brakes, all of it, and pulling the K-frame out. That's also going to make removing the engine and the transmission, which I'm going to be rebuilding both, the turbo ones, and putting those into this PT. It'll make that a lot easier to get those in and out as well. So that's the whole deal going on with this video. Now, what I had already done some stuff before I started filming the process, and the grill, the radiator, the air conditioning condenser, the upper intake manifold, and the throttle body are already removed when this video starts. And sorry, you'll have to just pick up where the video starts. But I am going to post another video soon where you get to see me do all those things on another PT. I'll be working on my niece's PT, which is also naturally aspirated, and I'm going to show the whole process of servicing that motor. We bought it off her up. She needed a car, and they had said it was overheating, kind of all the usual stuff you might hear about a more affordable PT Cruiser that's for sale. You know, it sounded to me like either the timing belt had broken, or the head gasket had potentially blown or was leaking, causing it to overheat. All those sorts of telltale things. So the idea was I was going to get that PT and completely service the motor, replacing gaskets, seals, timing belt, the whole deal. And I wanted to film that process again, so you'll get to see that all from scratch, including the grill, including the radiator and the air conditioning condenser, getting that out of the way to replace the engine, the cylinder head gasket, everything that you need to do to get there to do that, including the intake manifold and the timing belt, doing that assembly. So you're going to get to see me remove all those same components when it comes to like the timing belt and getting the motor out of this car, but you'll get to see a little more in detail for what you can do to service those parts in the other video I post, if you're not pulling a motor. So there will still be a lot of stuff still attached to that motor when I do service it. I'm not going to be pulling out as much because I'm not removing the motor. That's it. I hope you guys enjoy this video. It's a little bit longer. There's a lot going on. Hopefully I got it all easy to follow with the comments, and thanks a lot. Hope it helps and you might learn something. The K-frame. Why am I removing the entire K-frame in this process? It's not only because I am removing the engine and the transmission. I'd say that's a must if you're going to do that, really. It's not that hard to remove the K-frame on these cars once you're into that big of a job. So because I am servicing and swapping the motor, the transmission, an entirely different exhaust system, because the turbocharger has a different exhaust manifold, a different catalytic converter, kind of a different line all the way back to the muffler. So to get to all of that, even just the exhaust stuff, it's going to be so much easier to have that K-frame and the rack and pinion and the steering and the brakes and the struts and suspension out of the way. So that's another reason I'm doing this and pulling this stuff out. I would do it anyway if I was going to be servicing the engine, like exhaust manifold, if I need to do anything a lot on the back of the motor, that's close to the firewall. I've done it a number of times and I've gotten so accustomed to it. CV axles, if you're doing that, if you're doing big strut and brake work and you're just doing that kind of work, I've found it's really not that much more added work to remove the K-frame to get to all that. It makes it a lot easier. I've done it now about 7 times on various PT cruisers, so I prefer this process for sure. Less banged knuckles and struggling with hard to reach bolts and things like that, trying to use tools that will get into tight spaces and things. Drop the K-frame, save yourself actually more time in the long run. Let's see. When you're doing that, when you are pulling the K-frame, if you're going to, you will need to disconnect the steering column. That rack and pinion, the column attaches to an arm that it's all bolted to the K-frame. So in order to lower it, you have to disconnect that from the steering column inside. That again is not that hard. You just get there underneath the dash. There's pretty much one nut, one bolt that are holding the column to that shaft. Disconnect those, and then you can lower it out. You will also need to disengage the CV axles from the assembly when you're lowering the K-frame. Now, depending on what you're going to reuse, you can make your life easier and not have to get another alignment, after removing the K-frame. So if you are keeping the same rack and pinion, and if you disconnect the steering knuckle from the lower control arm, which is on the K-frame, and you don't disconnect the steering knuckle from the strut, you're not going to mess up the alignment. By keeping the same tie rod ends and rack and pinion, and keeping the strut and the steering knuckle bolted the way they are, you will maintain your alignment. But you can still disconnect things enough from the K-frame where you can remove it. So you got some options. I disconnect everything. I take it all apart. The struts are removed. I do leave the one bolt that holds the steering knuckles to the lower control arms, which I do leave connected to the K-frame, but I am going to be replacing the rack and pinion because the one that was on this naturally aspirated PT was leaking. So I'll be replacing that with a new one for the turbo motor that goes in. Why the grinder? So when it comes to the CV axles, I find the passenger, I'm sure everybody finds the passenger side is a lot easier to get out of the PT Cruiser transmission transfer case than the driver's side is. The driver's side is the shorter one. It's the one that's usually right here, you know, and it is the way it is recessed into the transfer case, the way it fits in there. It's in there a little bit deeper, and the clearance to fit something in behind that CV axle to pull it out is not very much. Now, again, I've done, you know, this about 7 times on different PT Cruisers, and out of all of that, and on almost all of them, I've done the, you know, the CV axles. They're not expensive these days, and if you're going to be in there working in that area, and you want to fix any steering issues, clunking issues, whatever, you replace a CV axle. So I've done it about 7 times. Maybe one of those times I was able to do it without damaging the CV axle in the process. So this is only on the driver's side. So I've seen this on some other videos posted from other folks, and I've taken to it being sort of my standard operation is I use a grinder and I grind a slot in that CV axle on the driver's side that I can then fit a pry bar into to get the CV axle out. It does destroy the CV axle. It's not reusable. It is kind of wasteful, and I don't like that, but like I say, I've damaged more just trying to get it out properly. So I've resorted to that because of the time, the effort, and the affordability of replacing the CV axle with a new one. And again, if you're going to be in there doing the kind of work, hopefully not that often, it's a good idea to replace the CV axle as well as the seal that goes into the transfer case. Just do those both at the same time. Solve a lot of you know, steering issues that you might be having. Okay, the center engine mount bracket. This bracket that you will see me remove in this video covers the timing belt assembly and both the center and the upper engine mounts bolt to this bracket, as well as the power steering pump. This bracket alone on the PT Cruiser engine is probably responsible for about 90% of the belief, the folklore, the sentiment surrounding the PT Cruiser and the motor being horrible to work on, just because of this bracket. And if you ever have to replace the timing belt, service the camshafts, the water pump, this bracket is something you will have to deal with. So it's no surprise that it causes a lot of a lot of people to not like to do the work. To service the timing belt, you got to take it all the way off, and getting the bracket on and off is not easy, but there is a way to do it even with stuff still bolted to the motor. Now again, you know, with as much as I've removed, it's gonna look a lot easier. It is, and if you were going into a project of, say, just the timing belt or just the water pump, you of course aren't going to have everything removed like I do. However, I've done this as well with, you know, exhaust manifold still connected, the whole, a lot of the internal stuff, the wire, you know, all the stuff that I've taken off up until this point was still there. And the trick is, and this is even stated in the service manual, that you need to raise or lower the motor as much as needed to gain access to the bolts on this bracket and to have the room to take it out, either from the top or from the bottom, depending on how you end up doing it. So keep in mind that the transmission mount, which is on the driver's side, will still be connected in this process. So when you're raising and lowering the motor, at this point you've unbolted the center bracket and you've removed the upper and lower motor mounts. So the motor and the transmission, which is still connected, you're swinging it up and down, hanging from that transmission mount. Okay, you get a lot of distance that you can travel. Okay, a lot more than you think. Now, you still got to be careful when you do this, and you know, as you jack it up or lower it down, you want to be taking the time to make sure you're not running into things, bending things, or overdoing it. But you can go quite far enough to where I've been able to get to all of the bolts, you know, even with the engine raised or lowered enough, I can get them all three, you know, pretty easily, without having to try and fish down into real tight space, or, you know, get some from the top end and then the others from the bottom end. I can like lower it enough to get all three of them, and then pull that bracket out. It's important that you also, when you want to pull it out, especially of the top, out of the top, once you've removed the upper motor mount, remove the bracket that holds the upper motor mount as well. That curves around the strut tower in the engine compartment, okay, that bracket, and it eats up a lot of room. If you're trying to pull the center mount bracket, this really tricky one we're talking about, it will run into that upper motor mount curved bracket, L bracket, and it'll seem like it's impossible. You take that thing out and you get a lot more room and you can pull it out pretty easy. Take the time to do it. It will save you a lot of heartache and a lot of cuts and bruises on your knuckles. That's it. Enjoy.